Before moving on to the story, if you subscribe to the channel and like it, I will be very happy. Good listening. I've been driving a taxi for about 5 years now, and in all that time, I've never had a ride like the one I had last Thursday. My name's Emma. I'm 34, a single mother of 2, and life's been a struggle since the divorce. Bills don't pay themselves, and late-night shifts driving this yellow cab are my way of keeping us afloat. Most nights are routine: drunk passengers, quiet streets, the occasional chat with someone looking for a bit of company. But that night was different. It was raining, heavy, relentless. The kind of rain that makes the roads look like black mirrors. I had just dropped off my last fare near the outskirts of town, debating whether to call it a night or squeeze in one more ride. It's funny how your gut can sometimes scream at you, and still, you ignore it. I should have gone home. As I turned down a narrow street, my radio crackled. "Dispatch. Any available cabs in the area?" I grabbed the receiver. "This is cab 28. I'm nearby. Gotta pick up request. Corner of Wilton and Ash. Passenger heading out of town." "Copy that," I replied, feeling a weird twinge of hesitation. Wilton and Ash. That area always gave me the creeps. It wasn't dangerous, just unsettling. The kind of place where shadows seem to stretch too far and streetlights flickered just a bit too often. But a fair's a fair. When I arrived at the corner, there was no one in sight, just the rain hammering against the windshield. I glanced at my phone to double-check the address when I saw her. A woman standing just a few feet from the car, drenched from the rain. She wore a long, dark coat that seemed too thin for the weather, her hair hanging in wet strands over her face. I rolled down the window just a crack. "You need a ride?" She nodded slowly, her face partially hidden under the hood of her coat. Without a word, she opened the back door and slid into the seat behind me. "Where to?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was something about her that instantly put me on edge. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Out of town? Just drive." I turned slightly, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were downcast, her hands gripping the edges of her coat tightly. The strange request and her demeanor were unsettling. But again, money's money. I figured she was trying to get away from something, or someone, maybe an argument, or maybe something worse. I'd seen enough drama in this job to know when not to ask questions. We drove in silence for what felt like an eternity, the rain pounding against the roof, the wipers barely keeping up. The road stretched out before us, dark and empty. My eyes flicked to the mirror again. She hadn't moved. Her head was still lowered, hands clenched in her lap. I cleared my throat. "So, heading somewhere in particular?" I asked, hoping to break the tension. She didn't answer immediately, and when she finally did, her voice was even softer than before. "I need to get away." "From what?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. There was a long pause. I thought she wasn't going to answer until she whispered, "He's following me." A chill ran down my spine. "Who's following you?" She didn't respond. Instead, her gaze slowly lifted to meet mine in the rearview mirror. Her eyes, pale and wide, locked onto mine, and for the first time, I noticed the bruises on her neck. I swallowed hard, gripping the wheel tighter. "Look, if you're in trouble, I can take you to the police station." "No," she said quickly, her voice suddenly sharp. "No police. Just keep driving." I nodded, my mouth dry. Something was seriously wrong, but I didn't press further. We continued in silence, the atmosphere inside the cab growing colder. I thought it was just my nerves until I noticed my breath fogging up the glass. I turned up the heat, but the cold only seemed to intensify. "Are you okay back there?" I asked, glancing at the mirror again. She wasn't there. I slammed the brakes, my heart racing. The back seat was empty. Where the hell? Before I could finish, I felt a presence beside me. Slowly, I turned my head, and there she was sitting in the passenger seat. Her wet hair clung to her face, her eyes hollow and fixed straight ahead. I couldn't breathe. What do you want?" Her head turned ever so slightly toward me. "He's here." I felt it then, a presence in the car, something heavy and oppressive, like the air itself was suffocating me. My hands trembled on the wheel as the rain outside seemed to blur into nothing. The road disappeared, and all that was left was the dark interior of the cab and the feeling that we weren't alone. Suddenly, the radio crackled again, but this time, it wasn't dispatch. It was a low, guttural voice, deep and rasping. "You can't run." I jerked my hand to turn off the radio, but the voice continued, filling the car, echoing in my head. "She belongs to me." The woman beside me trembled, her hands covering her ears. "Please," she whispered, "don't let him take me." I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening, but nothing made sense. "Who is he?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "What is this?" She didn't answer. Instead, she began to cry, her sobs quiet and filled with despair. Then, the temperature in the cab plummeted. I could see my breath again, and the windows began to frost over. I heard a slow, deliberate knock on the back window. 3 taps, clear and precise. I didn't dare look. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my entire body frozen in place. But the knocking didn't stop. "Emma," the woman whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please drive." "How you know my name?" I whispered, finally turning to face her. But she was gone. The passenger seat was empty, and the cab was completely silent. I blinked, my mind reeling. Had I imagined it? Had I just hallucinated the whole thing? But then from the rearview mirror, I saw it. A shadowy figure in the back seat, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. The knocking started again. This time it wasn't from outside the car. The knocking reverberated through the car, louder and more insistent. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The shadow in the back seat was growing, shifting like a dark cloud, its eyes burning into me. "Drive!" The voice hissed from behind. My body finally snapped into action. I floored the gas pedal, the tires screeching as the cab lurched forward. The rain blurred the road into a smear of black and silver, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away from whatever was in my car, from whatever was following that woman, or me. The knocking continued, rhythmic and maddening, as though the thing in the back seat was toying with me. I didn't dare look in the mirror. My knuckles were still tight on the wheel, heart racing so fast it hurt. Then, without warning, the radio crackled again, that same deep, rasping voice. "You can't run from him. He always finds her." My breath caught in my throat, the words sending an icy chill down my spine. Who was he? And why was this happening to me? None of it made sense. I just wanted to go home, back to my boys, back to normal. Suddenly, the cab jolted violently as if I'd hit something. The knocking stopped, and for a second, everything went silent. I dared a glance in the rearview mirror. The shadow was gone. I blinked, my mind trying to catch up. Was it over? Was the thing gone? But as I slowed the car, trying to make sense of everything, the familiar voice whispered, closer this time, as though it was right in my ear. "He's here." I screamed, slamming the brakes. The cab skidded to a stop in the middle of the road. The door behind me creaked open, and a cold gust of wind blew in, chilling me to the bone. Slowly, I turned around. The back seat was empty. For a moment, I just sat there, shaking, gripping the wheel as if it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. The rain still poured, the night still stretched out before me, but everything felt wrong, terribly wrong. I fumbled with my phone, trying to call for help, but the screen flickered, then died. The clock on the dashboard blinked erratically before turning off completely. The entire cab plunged into darkness. Then, from somewhere in the distance, a sound echoed through the rain. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. This time it was coming from inside the car, and I knew, without a doubt, that wherever I drove, whatever road I took, I wasn't alone anymore.